This is not a single of a great man. There's a vast conspiracy in back of this. He's part of the problem that needs to be investigated. That's why it's a mass investigation. This is the reason they took Charlie Kirk out. That and Charlie at a deeper level, as you see, bringing so many people to Christ, really changing the culture. Folks laughed at Charlie when he came up with this idea of doing it because the festering sore is the universities coming up, the culmination of the way your children have been, the propaganda they've been fed by very evil people. And that is what we now have to do. We have to use school boards, we have to use legislation, and all these people coming and attacking Charlie and his memory, they all must be fired, they all must be terminated. The great thing about our movement is the peaceful nature of the way we use power. Last night in Huntington Beach, 5,000 people all over the nation, spontaneous self-organizing prayer vigils in remembrance of Charlie. No cars burned, no riots, no cities burned, no violence. But Sam Hyde had that quite powerful, and he's a comedian, had a quite powerful end to the what we put onto the back of the prayer vigil, because I thought it was important to always keep in mind what we're fighting, right? The memory of Charlie Kirk has to go through his work. And today at noon, we'll be tossing to the Charlie Kirk Show. The Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, will be hosting the show from the White House compound. I'm not sure if the West Wing of his office or across at EOB, where they actually have a pretty sophisticated studio. And they're going to have guest hosts all week to drive what Harry Enton's talking about right there. Charlie Kirk, not only in the field all the time, at the universities, going to the point of contact to drive the message, but also through social media. TikTok, he became a TikTok. He's the one that got President Trump on TikTok. He became a TikTok expert of how to use TikTok to get his message out. And of course, the show here on Real America's Voice, it was also a podcast. And he had, I think it was Salem Radio, went out simulcast. Charlie was everywhere, ubiquitous. And he was where everybody was, at touch points. Make sure you meet people where they are and spread your message. And he did not back off. And that's why he is a martyr. He's a modern-day Christian martyr. Of that, it can be no doubt. If you look at the hate, and finally, and this is the big, I think, news over the weekend, and it hasn't quite gotten out about the shift. This was being treated as a single. It's not a single. This is not a single of a great man. There's a vast conspiracy in back of this. Antifa needs to be designated as a domestic organization. And hey, if you want to make it international, there's plenty of evidence of that. In fact, it came out of Europe. The trans part of this is a subset of that. That is also a conspiracy, an active conspiracy. A organization needs to be investigated. The New York Post has got has a great piece up. We'll put it up in a little while as we discuss this. It's now the law enforcement is now focused, and there was a lot of law enforcement that was fighting this. They want to treat it as it's not a simple. This is far deeper and far more malignant. And that's why in the next 2 weeks, to make sure we go after that, and any foreign money that came in, any foreign influence that came in from the Chinese Communist Party to Soros to others, Arabella, all of it. They have 3 levels. They have the first level of the Antifa, and the radicals, or the kind of the foot soldiers, right? Then they have a second level. You're going to be shocked. That second level is made up of what's infiltrated the military. No, it's not white nationalism or white extremism, extremist politics. That's what they try to sell under Biden's regime. You have members of the military that are radicalized. You've seen this in some of the posts about Charlie Kirk, but you have many that are in there deep, that are training and working. You heard Tage Gill, that are working with Antifa and training Antifa. And then you have the top level, and that's the people that are trying to destroy this country, the financiers in the networks of globalist financiers and others that are using this to foment a civil war here in the United States of America. I think the president today is talking about calling another national emergency in Washington about ICE I believe you can go to Portland and declare martial law, at least in that 5 or 6 block area, and clean the whole mess out. Arrest them today. As I said, the FBI should be kicking down doors this afternoon. I also don't understand, you've got this guy Cox out in Utah. I'll play a clip and I'll get to Cox after the next break. You got Cox in Utah putting out, the love interest, roommate, whatever, furry. He didn't know anything about it, but he's cooperating. Well, how do we know that? He should be rounded up and put under arrest right now as a potential accessory before the fact or co-conspirator. Cox should be investigated. Why the White House allowed, and they're saying we had nothing to do with this guy, but even the first time when Cash flew out there, why was he allowed to have a speaking role? Who made that decision? He needs to be investigated. His administration needs to be investigated. The mother works for the Behavioral Health. When you get into that thing, it's a rat's nest. Okay, and you got them putting stuff on. You've seen it all the time. We've had Brandon Showalter and Dr. Miriam Grossman and people on here for years, and Sheila, which you've done a magnificent job over Abled Child, where they're pushing these and they're pushing all this stuff on these young men. This is why the young men are revolting. This is why they saw Charlie as a breath of fresh air. Hey, I got something that can get you out of the dumps. Read the New Testament of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. How about that? This is why they killed him.
Well, he's
and
a
now
martyr.
They said, which I said, what's the odds that the guys ask? What's the odds of the guys asking, the Sheila Matthews, which she's putting forward every day about how there's a radical, violent people, particularly children, striking out, as you saw in the manifesto. Remember, we don't know what the motive is. Well, you read the manifesto, the guy says, I was brainwashed. I hate myself. I want to figure out how to undo this. If I can, I can't. I got my hair, I was brainwashed. I think I got a motive, right? Which they never want to talk about because it's a racket. The governor of Utah needs to be investigated, full stop. He's been pushing this stuff for years, and now you got this Roblox, and people can put these games up. The other day, they had to go and take them down. People were putting up games for children to play that about the Charlie Kirk. Think about that for a second. Think of the perverted mind that would do that. Well, that's what you got in a lot of this stuff. And Cox is not free. He's not a truthful narrative. He's part of the problem that needs to be investigated. That's why it's a mass investigation. When is the FBI going to go talk to him? When they're going to roll the mother up? They're destroying our children, and they're destroying our children for money. These LGBTQ and furry sites that were all taken down instantly, got to go back to all those. It looks like it appears some of those might even put up stuff before Charlie Kirk was there. But they certainly knew about it almost instantaneously, and particularly his Discord chat group knew about it instantaneously after he shot it. He was kind of making jokes. Why are they not rolled up like the Boston Marathon roommates? Remember the 4 or 5 guys that were the younger guys' roommates in college, and they knew immediately who it was? They saw that as soon as the videos came up, they said, hey, that's our roommate. They never informed police. Well, they got their doors kicked in a couple of days later, and I believe they all went to prison. If you're going to stop this, it's not going to stop until you stop it.
No, you do not have the power to, except possibly in self-defense. Why is it a problem for the people in power? Because once again, it circumscribes what they can do. It sets a limit on their powers. Last week, within just really minutes after Charlie Kirk was shot at that event in Utah, a kind of proxy broke out over his memory. Who gets to own it? Who gets to use it? While the rest of us were still reeling in shock, trying to figure out what happened. A ton of people appeared online, not just in this country, to tell you exactly what happened, exactly what it meant, and exactly what we should do next. And you can see why. With this level of emotion, rage, and grief in the air, it's pretty wise to leverage that much energy. It's almost like power. It can be used for good or bad. And a lot of people wanted to use it. There's no question about that. So they begin telling you, Charlie for this, he lived for this, and he for that.
Tucker asserts that in the crazier corners of the left, Charlie was smeared as a Nazi. a baseless label used to dehumanize him and justify hate.
So the crazier reaches of the left, it was Charlie was a nut. And the lesson is, it makes sense. He was a bad guy who got what he deserved, and a lot of them said that out loud. Certain parts of the right immediately told you that actually this was about something completely different. Charlie, for many began to say the prime minister of said that, and so did a lot of other people. Charlie was a defender of it, which he was, by the way, and therefore he for that cause. But none of these explanations, all self-serving, are really satisfactory. They don't capture who Charlie Kirk was, and on some basic level, they're dishonest. Charlie was not he was not because he was yes, he was a defender of, he didn't, however. Why did he? What was his life about? What was the sin, the core sin that Charlie Kirk committed against somebody, power, that got him in the end? And the answer is right in front of us, certainly those of us who knew him. Charlie's life was defined by his Christian faith, not his spirituality, but his belief in Jesus, his life as a Christian. And everything in his life flowed from those beliefs, everything.
Tucker asserts that everything Charlie did, said, and believed flowed from one core truth. Above all, he was a Christian.
Everything he did, said, and believed came from the fact that he was, above all, a Christian. And that is and was, and in fact has always been, deeply provocative and offensive to the rest of the world. And why is that? It's worth thinking about it for just a second. Christianity doesn't seem like the kind of religion that would provoke people to anger and violence. In fact, it seems just the opposite. It's the world's most profoundly nonviolent religion, maybe the world's only truly nonviolent religion, a religion based on a man who Christians believe was also God, who, as he was being led away to be tortured to death on made-up charges, scolded one of his disciples for fighting back. This is a religion committed to love above all, and to living in peace and harmony, truly. It's a universalist religion that believes that every person has a at heaven. It's not exclusionary at all. And so you would think it would make sense that if you're a government or if you're in power, that you'd want a lot of Christians living in your country, because they're not going to cause massive problems. Not a lot of sincere Christians are fomenting insurrection at any given moment. Pretty much none, most of the time. They're tidy, they get married, they love their children, they pay their taxes, they're commanded to pay their taxes. So why wouldn't you want a nation full of Christians? Why wouldn't you encourage this religious belief, even if it wasn't yours? Why would you hate it? Well, there are a couple of reasons. There are a couple of things about Christianity, and these were evident throughout Charlie's public life, that are deeply provocative to the people in power. And the first is the insistence that Christianity comes with inherently that you are not God. You are not God, and neither are your leaders. God is God, and all of us stand before him in the end to be judged, and all of us will be found lacking. Christians believe the only way to heaven is through Jesus. That's the only way.
We're all fallen, believer or not, so no leader deserves godlike status. Hold them accountable, temper reverence with realism, and demand humility alongside responsibility.
But all of us, whether we believe in Jesus or not, are fallen. We are sinners. We are less than we ought to be. We are not gods, and neither are the people who lead us. And this has a lot of implications. The first being, if you're not God, you don't get to do whatever you want. There are limits. There are rules that you didn't write that you have to abide by. That's not a judgment. That's a statement of fact. Some call it natural law. It's been the basis of every functioning society since the beginning of time. But the basis of our society is the Christian understanding of justice, which flows from that belief. You are not God. God is. He writes the most basic rules. You abide by them. Period. That's the basis of our law. That's the basis of Western law. And that is a threat, a challenge to people who would ignore the limits on their behavior, very much including our leaders and very much including the most powerful people in our society, whether they're elected or not. Nobody wants to be told you're not allowed to do something. And Christianity inherently tells people that. It doesn't judge them, it just states it clearly. No, you do not have the power to, except possibly in self-defense, but you can't just go killing people. And you can't go killing people because, and this is the second thing about Christianity that tends to set the teeth of the powerful on edge, Christianity insists that every human being is created by God. Every single one. And that means that every human being has a soul, a distinct, unique soul created by God. It is, once again, the only true universalist faith there is. And the New Testament is the story of this, an underread collection of books. That is not the story of the Old Testament. It is very much the story of the New Testament. In the New Testament, all people are God's chosen, every single one. And the story itself makes that point. The founder of most Christian churches in the early Near East was a former Pharisee, a Jew who was in charge of Christians, until he famously met Jesus on the road to Damascus. His name was Saul. He became Paul, and he is the most prolific author in the New Testament and the basis of a lot of Christian theology. And his life tells the story.
Tucker claims that people can change no matter their past or appearance, because being created by God means no one is beyond redemption.
People can change no matter what they look like, no matter what they previously believed, no matter where they're from, no matter what language they speak, because they are created by God. And every person, every single person, whether you like them or their relatives or the way they look or not, has that chance because all were created by God and all were loved by God. That is the basis of Christianity. That's the Christian story. And so a sincere Christian proceeds with that belief. There is no tribalism in Christianity. There is no identity politics. It's the opposite. You may prefer to be with people who look like you. That's fine. But God doesn't prefer to be with people who look like you. God prefers to be with all people because he created all people. He's the God of the universe, not just of the people you like. And that, again, has massive implications for the way that sincere Christians live and for the way that Charlie Kirk lived his life. And the first is, if other people have souls, if they, like you, were created by God, then they have freedom of conscience. You can tell them what they ought to think, but you can't make them. You can tell them what they ought to say, but you can't force them. Christianity does not convert by the sword. It can't. It requires free will. And it requires free will because it respects the individual conscience emanating from the distinct soul of every human being. And that is why in the West, which is based on Christianity, our civilization is a Christian civilization, tattered though it currently is. Collective punishment, hurting people for the sins of their relatives, is unthinkable. Because each person will stand alone as he was made before God. And every person is equal before God, fundamentally. Doesn't mean each person is equal in his ability. It doesn't mean each person is equal in the choices he makes. Of course not. But it means that every person is a human being with a divine spark inside. That is the core assumption of Christianity. And it was obvious when you watch Charlie Kirk that he believed that. Charlie's been famously quoted for the last couple of days saying he abhors anti-Semitism. That is absolutely right. And he did. He said that in public, and he said it very often in private. He meant it, too. But he abhorred racism and bigotry on the basis of genetics of all kinds because he was a Christian. And he believed that God created each person. Now, why is this a problem for temporal authorities? Why is it a problem for the people in power? Because once again, it circumscribes what they can do. It sets a limit on their powers.